What's going on, guys? Antonio here. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up for me, and let's get into it. All right, we're on WrestleZone, and they've got this article up. I did a video a few days ago about Mr. McMahon, the Netflix documentary. I had not watched it yet. Actually, I cut the video. It was about 24 hours before Mr. McMahon was released, which I think was on September the 25th. And since then, the documentary has dropped. I watched all 6 parts, and I'm seeing a lot of articles and different things being written about it. So I kind of, I read this article, and, Mr. McMahon, producer, says Vince McMahon is not a reliable narrator in the series. The basic, like I said, go on WrestleZone and read this, but there's so many, Sports Key to all these different wrestling blogs that cover, and there's a bunch of YouTubers that have written. So yes, I am throwing my name in the hat as far as covering the documentary. I thought Mr. McMahon was good. It wasn't great. There were some things in it. Some of it was really strange, and I'm sitting there going, Vince is kind of an odd duck. He's a strange egg, as they say. He can kind of come off as aloof, like certain things he says, I could not imagine a normal person having that conversation in, just in polite society. And certain things he said, I couldn't believe that he allowed himself to be filmed saying this. And I know Bruce Pritchard was upset with some of the stuff in the documentary, and they actually in episode 6, they had some footage because they started filming this in 2021, I think September of 2021. And then in episode 6, there is a part of an interview with Bruce Pritchard. I guess they had started sending out preview copies of the documentary. It wasn't complete, but they were starting to, let everybody go, hey, this is kind of where we're going, like some feedback on it. But I know because Vince McMahon saw, if you go on Vince McMahon's Twitter, he actually released a statement talking about that they used old cuts and they did all kind of different things. And, there was a lot of stuff that they exaggerated or took things out of context and whatnot. But Bruce Pritchard was interviewed in January of 2024, so this year, after he had seen a rough cut of some of the earlier episodes, and he thought that, oh, this is a hit piece. You guys weren't trying to actually do a fair documentary. You guys were just going after Vince. And so and he told a story about, what was this, like 24, 25 years ago, his wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor gave her 4 years to live. So basically he went to Vince. He was distraught. Vince was like, he picked up the phone. He's calling people. He's using his resources. He got Bruce Pritchard's wife, like some of the best specialists out there from all over the country, and helped pay for things. And, 24 years later, Bruce Pritchard's wife, and her name is Stephanie, if I'm not, Stephanie Pritchard, but Stephanie's still alive and they got grandkids and the whole deal. So he obviously has some bias because Vince McMahon played such a pivotal role in helping his wife get the best medical treatment, and he was there with them and just making, checking on her and making sure that they didn't need anything. So he obviously has seen a different side of Vince McMahon than the public has. There were a few times in the documentary where Vince, you could kind of tell, when he's talking about his early childhood with his stepfather. If you've read about Vince, his mother, he didn't meet his dad till he was 12 years old. His last name wasn't McMahon until he met Vince McMahon Sr., and Vince McMahon took him with him, and I think put him in military school and the whole thing. But yeah, when he was 12 years old, his father came into his life, and he, put him in military school. He went through school, went in college, started working for his dad, obviously bought his father out, the whole deal. But, he took the McMahon name. But there are interviews. I know he did an interview with Playboy. This was like 20 something years ago, maybe 24, 25 years. He did a Playboy interview and kind of made it sound like he had maybe been sexually abused when he was a child. Certain things that maybe his mother did or overlooked or whatever. Then, so I don't know, maybe he's just wired different because they went over the case of the woman, the female referee that had sued, and they had old clips of like the Donahue show and stuff like that. And he was on there with like Dave Meltzer and stuff. Some of this stuff is really good. It's like some of this footage is like 35, 40 years old. It's crazy. And like I say, it's a thumbs up, but it could have been better. But he talked about, he got accused of sexual assault, and he was like, well, it was consensual, but even if it was, the statute of limitations, so it was kind of weird hearing him say certain things. And then he, there was another thing where he talked about when his children started, Shane obviously started getting involved in the WWE. He was a referee, and like he helped break down the rings, and he was on the announce team. They were giving him little jobs, and then finally, actually being on the creative team, working side by side with his father, and Shane's there, and you kind of get the sense that Vince never fully he loved Shane, but he didn't fully trust him. And a lot of people, I've heard Jim Ross say that Vince actually thinks that the person that should succeed him was Stephanie, not Shane. If something, matter of fact, it was a couple years ago, Jim Ross said that Vince actually told him, Shane's like his mom and Stephanie's like me. So you hear certain things that Shane's saying about why, he left the company and he came back and then he left again. It was that kind of stuff. So Shane really did want to take over. He wanted to be the successor. And then there's the story that Paul Heyman told where he tells this in the documentary where, Vince is like, if you want to take over, you need to buy me out like I bought my father out. And then if I don't go along, you can get rid of me like I would have got rid of my father. It was some weird stuff being said. Another thing, like I said, he said the statute of limitation thing. He also said he pitched a storyline where the Mr. McMahon character was going to get Stephanie McMahon pregnant. He was going to be in a relationship with his own daughter and get her pregnant. And he said that, they talked to Stephanie about it, and Stephanie was like, "Ooh, that sounds gross." And they didn't do it, which obviously Stephanie's normal. So that would have been a horrible, but this is the same company. Remember, they had, what was that woman, Mae Young in the Mark Henry storyline? And she gave birth to a hand. They were in a relationship. Mae Young was like 80 years old, and they had her give birth on Raw, and she gave birth to a hand, and that was Vince trying to be funny like that. So him getting his daughter pregnant was not the most outrageous thing. And they talked about the Ring Boy scandal briefly. That part really kind of irritated me a bit because they were trying to frame it, because they mentioned, Pat Patterson was one of 3 people that got fired during the Ring Boy scandal, right? So the other 2 people were not allowed to come back, but Vince said, hey, of those 3 people, one of those people were innocent, and he brought I think he had told that to Dave Meltzer that Pat Patterson was innocent. The other 2 people, they were guilty of sin, but he brought Pat Patterson back because he felt like people were just going after Pat because he was gay. But they had Tony Atlas in the documentary, and Tony Atlas is going, I didn't like Pat Patterson because he would always touch my pecker. He said that. And you can go on YouTube, and there's a little clip of Rowdy Roddy Piper, and he's talking about Pat Patterson too. And those guys aren't the only people that are saying that Pat Patterson used to take liberty with the boys. They would, they touch him, grab him on the ass, do all kind of little stuff like that. So This is about more than Pat Patterson's sexuality. If you go to any other job and your boss, male or female, touches you inappropriately, there's going to be some consequences. There are going to be lawsuits, but this was a wrestling business. So obviously it puts Tony Atlas in this weird situation where he's like, okay, I could punch this guy out, or I can't. He's like the number 2 guy in the company, so I can't go to Vince, because if I go to Vince and Pat are like very, very close friends. So the number 1 guy in the company is not going to get rid of one of his best friends. He loved Pat. I heard Jim Cornette, and I actually have to applaud Brian Last for actually using some common sense, because Jim Cornette, he loved Pat Patterson. They honored him when Pat Patterson died. You know, they did a nice tribute to him on the Jim Cornette, was it the Jim Cornette drive-thru or the Jim Cornette experience? Either way, they when Pat Patterson died, they gave a tribute to him. And you can catch that on YouTube. But one thing, even though Brian Last is going, hey, Tony's right, he shouldn't have to be worried about going to work and this guy grabbing him on the junk and everything. That's not cool. And Jim Cornette's brushing it off, and he was like, oh man, these are the stuff the boys would just rib each other and stuff like that. And this didn't sound like ribbing. This sounded like Pat Patterson had a habit of, because there was another guy, he left it was WWF at the time, and he went to WCW because he didn't want to be doing stuff. He said this, I can't remember, it was like Tony something. He mentioned this. This is a white guy, and he mentioned that Pat Patterson was trying to, do stuff to him, and he didn't want to go along. So obviously, if you don't participate, you get dropped down the card. And then, so he went to WCW to work over there, because he was like, yeah, all of a sudden I'm like a job guy, and they had brought me in, and I thought I was going to be featured talent, because he didn't want to go along. That doesn't sound like someone that's just, and I was actually surprised that Jim Cornette was defending. He's like, oh man, the guys, they're just ribbing. This is stuff that the boys would do to each other and stuff like that. And like I said, I love both the Jim Cornette drive-thru and the Jim Cornette experience. But Jim Cornette is not very consistent when he's talking about people that he actually had worked with in the professional wrestling business and that he liked. You kind of look at how he talks about people like Chris Jericho. He used to talk very glowingly about Chris Jericho. And then Chris Jericho was, went to AEW, he started criticizing AEW. Obviously, Chris Jericho came at him because he's like, hey man, I'm working here. What are you doing? And then the January 6th situation happened after the 2020 election. Chris Jericho's wife and his mother-in-law were there. And I know he had Donald Trump Jr. on his podcast. Obviously, Jim Cornette does not like Donald Trump. He started going after him. He loved The Undertaker. He loved Kane. He helped Kane get his, remember, what was it, Dr. whatever that dentist character was, when they brought Glenn Jacobs, who would become Kane. He was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling working for Jim Cornette, brought him into the WWE as that weird dentist character. That didn't work. Then they brought him back as what was he? He was the fake Diesel. They had a fake Razor Ramon and a fake Diesel after Razor Ramon and Diesel went over to WCW. And so then, like I said, the dentist character did not work. They brought him back as the fake Diesel, and then he ended up transitioning into Kane, which obviously he made a lot of money as Kane. And but when Glenn Jacobs got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, Jim Cornette, I think he thanked 3 people, and Jim Cornette was one of the people that he named, because he knows Jim Cornette helped break him into WWE. He wouldn't be there without him. But Glenn Jacobs happens to be a conservative. He's a Republican. So he's supporting Donald Trump. Again, Jim Cornette doesn't like Donald Trump. So all of a sudden, this guy he's been friends with for 30 years is like the worst person on the planet. Same with The Undertaker. Undertaker is another person that he was in WCW with The Undertaker, Mark Calloway, and came obviously to WWF and became The Undertaker, became a big star. Jim Cornette loved him, found out he was a Trump guy. Oh, boom, same thing. People accused Ric Flair of being a racist and doing all kind of stuff with women 30 years ago when he was in WCW. Jim Cornette loved Ric Flair. What was it, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Ric Flair hosted a fundraiser for Donald Trump. And all of a sudden, Ric Flair is the worst person on the planet. So that's why I'm saying you can't. So supporting Donald Trump makes you the worst person on the planet. But this guy who was a clear sexual predator, Pat Patterson, who did this to numerous wrestlers that were calling him out. Like I said, Tony Atlas straight up said in the Netflix documentary, I didn't like that guy. He was touching my pedigree. You know what I'm saying? So he's telling, and like I said, he's not the only one. Go look up the Roddy Piper thing. There were multiple people. So I kind of, this is about more than, Pat Patterson was gay, so that made people uncomfortable, so they accused him of all kind of stuff. It was a little bit more detailed than that. But like I said, I thought Mr. McMahon was solid. There were using Phil Mushnick. Phil Mushnick clearly hates Vince McMahon. He's been writing hit pieces on him for like 35 plus years. So using someone like him in multiple segments just to bash on Vince. Vince McMahon got paid to do this. But in the last episode, this was right after some new allegations had dropped. So he decided he's not in the last episode because he was supposed to get interviewed for that. And then so he decided not to show up for that. But like I said, go check it out. It's on Netflix. If you watch Mr. McMahon, if you agree with what I said, if you disagree, get in the comments. We're on the road to 3,000. I need you. I want your Facebook, Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on Threads. All at Akari Press. Type in AkariPress.com. It will take you to my comic book brand, Way of the Gun. I've got the link to that and my Gumroad in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out.